All right. To get started, let me first hit you with some numbers that I want you to remember, right? Maybe in your customer conversation, you may want to repeat these numbers as well, where you discuss the Entra and the identity security with your customers. 600 million, that's the first number as you see. That's the number of identity attacks Microsoft sees every single day against identities in its cloud services. I guess let that number sink in. 600 million attacks per day, right? And 99% of these are password attacks. These means the single biggest attack your customer have is the humble username and password, right? So that's the biggest attack surface, 99% of it, as you could see. But I guess it gets worse as we go forward. The token replay attacks are up by 111%. These are sophisticated attacks where the cyber criminals they steal the authentication tokens, meaning even the MFA protected accounts can be compromised if the tokens are not properly protected. And then we have the adversary in the middle, also sometimes referred as AITM, or the phishing attacks. They're all up to 146% increased as far as the numbers are concerned, right? These are attacks which sits between the user and the legit service, stealing credentials as well as tokens in real time. I'm sure, I know if I ask you back based on these numbers, I'm sure you would have your customers, you as a partner, of course, you would have your customers, or maybe you as a partner always advising your customers to deploy and configure the MFA across the organization, right? But as you could see, despite having MFA, there is still an increase in the number of cyber attacks, right? Specifically from an identity perspective. So we'll keep these numbers in mind. We'll come back to it as we go forward from a mitigation standpoint. But just sink, let these numbers sink in as we go forward. Yep. Now, as we further move into away from the numbers and we look at the identity threat landscape, this is where it gets really concerning. So we just talked about the volume of attacks, right, in the previous slide. What happens when the attackers, the same attackers now get access to the same AI tools which we are using, right? The answer is the attack surface will explode, right? That humble username password will be furthermore explored. And of course, the attack surface eventually will also further expand, right? So the AI powered attackers can now go ahead and generate some malware much more faster than ever. They can create hyper personalized phishing emails, which can defeat the human detection, of course, where they can automate the vulnerability discovery at scale. Even they can come up with some deep fake voices and videos for social engineering. And I'm sure you would have come across various different incidents around this. So I want to be very clear. This is not very theoretical. This is something which is happening as we speak today. 67% of the phishing attacks last year, in fact, used AI to craft all of these messages, right? The fake messages. So the days of obvious spam emails with some minor spelling mistakes, they are largely over, yes. And this is exactly why Microsoft is investing so heavily in AI powered defense. Because the only way to fight AI powered attacks is with the AI powered protection. And that's exactly where the Entra and its integration with, let's say, Security Copilot help comes to the rescue of this specific problem statement. But we will talk about that as we go forward, as we progress with the session. But keep these baselines into mind, right? Now, if you look at from the business impact perspective, right, the business impact we are looking at is 8 trillion US dollars. So that's the projected global cybercrime cost. So to put that into perspective, if cybercrime, for example, were a country, it would be the world's third largest economy, to be honest, right? Behind only the US and China. These are There are over 3 billion passwords in use by humans and machines right now. Each one is a potential entry point for attackers. And the speed of attacks, that is 4,000 password attacks per second, is detected by Microsoft. That's not per minute or per hour, it's per second. So your customers' identities are under constant assault. So the key message for our customers is the question is no longer if they will be attacked, it is when and whether they are ready. So Entra is that readiness layer. With that context set, let us now jump into the solution. Let's first start, of course, with the Entra Suite, and let's understand what this new suite is all about. Now we know the problem. It is massive and it is growing. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the Microsoft answer to the problem statement. That's the Entra Suite. And that's a game-changing portfolio, right? It would help you, of course, understand when we go further at the deep level, because it's one of the most important conversations you should have with your customers as you further get into the various different conversations with your customer. So the Entra Suite is described as all-in-one identity and network access solution. But what does that actually mean? Before the Entra Suite, the organizations had to buy separate tools for identity management, network access control or NAC, external identity or CIAM, and cloud permissions management, right? Or CIEM. So the Entra Suite kind of brings all of this into a single unified platform. So the core promise here is secure access for any identity from anywhere to any application, any resource, and now any AI as well. Right. So that's the vision Microsoft is building towards. For your customers, this means that they can simplify their security stack, they can reduce the vendor sprawl, and apply consistent policies across every access scenario, whether it's an employee working remotely, whether it's a partner accessing shared resources, or maybe even an AI agent accessing company data. We can leverage the Entra Suite for all of the use cases. So from your opportunity perspective as a partner, many customers, they are still using pointed solutions, right? Me being a consultant also, as we cater to our enterprise customers, we see a lot of customers may have heterogeneous uh, point solutions for maybe CIAM, maybe separate solution for enterprise identity in-house, maybe a separate solution for IGA, or maybe a separate solution for, let's say, on-prem customer identity, etc. With Entra Suite, we can have an opportunity for one tool for one single consolidated solution, rather than having one tool separately for SSO and for MFA, another for network access, and etc. Right? So Entra Suite is your consolidation story. Now, Microsoft has defined a four-stage journey, the zero trust journey, which maps directly to the Entra product family. So stage one is establishing the zero trust access control. So that's the foundation. That includes the strong authentication, MFA, conditional access. Now, most customers should start here if they haven't already done that. Stage two is secure access for the users or the employees. So as the hybrid work becomes much more permanent, the organizations has to secure access for workers everywhere, right? Not just on the corporate network. And stage three is secure access for customers and partners. Modern business, as you interact with external users constantly, like for example, external identity and CIM solution, they cover this stage. Stage four is secure access to any cloud resource. Unified permissions management across Azure, AWS, GCP, any cloud, etc. It helps managing the permission creeps across these various different clouds. So maybe with this specific conversation, you could definitely go ahead and check with your customers which stage they are at. Most typically, you would see the customers are between the stage one and stage two, right? That is establishing the zero trust and securing access for the employees, which means I guess there's a significant opportunity for them to help them advance rather, right? For you as a partners. Now, let me walk you first through the full Entra product family, right? I'll keep these to the essentials you need for more of your conversations. Number one, of course, we've got the Entra ID, which was as formerly known as Azure Active Directory, which is the core, right? This is your core cloud identity platform, and every other product builds on this foundation. Then we've got the Entra ID governance, you can think of this as the who should have access to what and for how long engine. So it's an automated lifecycle management. It gives you access recertification or access reviews. It also gives you entitlement management or role management, right? Then we have the Microsoft Entra External Identity. This is specifically for the customers, partners, guest. This is your B2B and the consumer identity and access management story. Fully customizable, developer friendly identity experiences are there. Then we've got the Entra verified ID, right? So this is specifically for the decentralized identity using open standards. You can think of this as digital credentials, which is verifiable, privacy preserving identity. Then we've got the Microsoft Entra Workload Identity. This is the NHI or the non-human identities, very specifically for applications, services, scripts, etc. So as the workload identities, they are now outnumbering the humans. I think the industry ratio is now 10 is to 1, which is very increasingly critical now from an NHI perspective. So it's very important. Then we have the Entra Internet access. This is the identity centric secure web gateway, which protects the internet and M365 traffic. And then we've got the Entra private access, which is the ZTNA or the zero trust network access replacement for the legacy VPNs. So the Entra typically covers every identity scenario which your customer could be facing. It's not a point solution, it's more of a larger platform. Entra ID, in fact, is the heart of everything which we are going to discuss, of course. There are three core value pillars here, right? Number one is the secure adaptive access. This is just not about using just MFA, right? It's about being context aware, risk adaptive access decisions happening in real time. So every single sign in is evaluated against hundreds of signals. The signals could be based on the user location, the health of the device which the user might be using, the behavior patterns of the user, and based on this, the access is granted or denied accordingly. Then the second is, of course, we've got the seamless user experience. Security that users hate will be typically circumvented as right. So typically, and this is a classic discussion between the balancing between the security and productivity, right? So Entra ID, in fact, balances a strong security with frictionless user experience through SSO, passwordless, and also intelligent re-authentication, right? Then we've got the unified identity management. That's basically one single unified console, one single policy engine, and one directory, which manages identities across the clouds, on premises, as well as the hybrid environments. Typically, if you check with your customer, normally, like for example, my enterprise customers, they may be in heterogeneous environments typically when the identity systems are concerned, right? So I'm sure when you actually go back to your customer and ask on how many identity systems they may have, at least for the enterprises, the answer could be more than one, right? So the Entra ID is like your consolidation conversation, which you may want to have with your customers. On the other side, we've got the Entra ID governance. Now, Entra ID governance answers a very fundamental compliance question. Example, does the right person still have the right access to the right resource? And that too at the right period, right time, right? Maybe right now. So that's what the Entra ID governance does for you. So here there are three pillars further, right? So first is of course productivity. Second, we have the security and the automation. Now, governance as should not slow your employees or the users down, right? It should automate the routine access decisions so the IT can focus more on the exceptions. So the key use cases, if you want to highlight with your customers, for example, in the governance context, could be employee onboarding, offboarding, automation of that, periodic access reviews or recertification as it is known typically, specifically for the compliance purposes, maybe for ISO 27K1, HIPAA, PCI, SOC 2, GDPR, etc. And then, of course, this self-service access request, which can route through the approval workflows. Entra ID, in fact, is consistently rated by analysts as one of the most cost-effective identity governance solutions. So for customers who are replacing their on-premises legacy IGA tools like SailPoint or Savient, I guess the ROI conversation here would be more compelling when you look at the Entra ID governance, and we'll talk about that as we move further, right? Now, the other part of Entra Suite is the external identity, which is Microsoft's answer to the exploding external identity challenge. Typically, when we talk about external identity or external users, who are these external users? These could be customers, could be patients, citizens, partners, suppliers, anyone who is outside your organization and who needs access to your applications, right? So the key differentiator here would be external identity supports bring your own identity, right? BYOI. So users can sign in with their Google, Facebook, or existing Microsoft account. So for consumers specifically, in fact, this dramatically reduces the friction. For B2B scenarios, the partners can be invited with some minimal friction, and you get the same conditional access and identity protection policies which you apply to the employees. So here, one more important aspect, as we speak, I'm actually doing a very large CIAM deployment, including, of course, Microsoft Entra and then the Microsoft partner products like Ping for a large customer, which has got many more enterprise integrations like SAP and some homegrown applications, etc. But I think and the bigger lesson learned from that specific project I would like to share here is it's very important to have a CIM system to be much more developer friendly, right? Because if the CIM system is not developer friendly, then the integration per se, because CIM has to be very customizable. There could be very unique use cases specifically in the CIM system, right? So developer friendly matters here. So external identity in Entra has an excellent developer tooling, which is important for customers building customer facing applications and so on. Verified ID also is most forward looking product in the Entra family. It's based on the concept of decentralized identities where the individuals own and control their own credentials and not the organizations from where the users actually represent, right? So you can think about the use cases, for example, fast remote onboarding, right? Like, for example, new employees or contractors, they can verify their identity credentials on day where they're getting onboarded without IT involvement. Or maybe the other use case could be secure access, right? So let's say once you've verified the user, you can give them exactly the right permissions they want, right? Or they need, or they should be given. And then easy account recovery. If they lose access, they can re-verify without an help desk ticket. So this technology, in fact, is built upon W3C standards, specifically for the verifiable credentials, which makes it interoperable with the lot of other identity ecosystem as well. Now, remember, this is still an emerging use case for most of the customers. So you might want to position it as a next roadmap item or evolution for for your customers. Maybe you can start your conversation, and I'm sure there could be so many other use cases which may come up. Very specifically, you will see verified ID working very well with. Currently, we are doing proof of concept with the manufacturing enterprise, right? So for manufacturing enterprise, where they keep onboarding a lot of partners, suppliers, vendors, temporary workers, blue collar workers, where they may come up for a very short stint in the organization and where they don't need to set up for a longer period of time. So hence, you don't have that amount of time and also the documentation which you can authoritatively collect as you do typically for the employee onboarding, right? So for that, verified ID is a very well used, very well technology to be used as far as the onboarding, quick onboarding is concerned, right? Or maybe, of course, faster remote onboarding, as I mentioned. It's not that you could not use verified ID for an employee onboarding. For sure, you could actually leverage the verified ID for the employee onboarding as well. And specifically, other use case could be for the banks and some financial institutions as well, where the verified ID could be much more useful use case. We'll double click on it as we go further in this, but just remember all of these various different context, right? When we have these functionalities in Entra ID, then we've got the Entra workload identity. as I was mentioning previously also, that non-human identities, right? Any identity which is attached to a non-human, that is application, services, script, automation, it now outnumbers the human identities in any given organization. The rough ratio is 10 is to 1. Although we know this is happening in the organization, but a lot of organizations have very little governance over these non-human identities, right? You can think about this as every app your customer runs has got credentials somewhere, right? Now, those credentials could be in the form of application secrets, it could be in the form of certificates, it could be managed identities, which could be often long lived, overprivileged, and unmonitored. The workload identity provides a conditional access policies for these identities, like workload identity. It also now gives us risk detection for any compromised workload identities, lifecycle management. So the credentials do not accumulate indefinitely in the organization, and we are able to monitor the credentials even for the workload identities in the same way as we would be doing for the human identities. Now that's a great security posture conversation for you, right? So typically you may want to check with your customers on how many app registrations, how many service principals they may have, right? Do they have that information on whether these service principals or this NHIs, they are all dormant? And I'm sure the answer is going to be always eliminating as far as the context is concerned. Internet access is Microsoft answer to secure web gateway solution, but I think with a key differentiator which is very unique in this context, that is the identity centric context, right? So the traditional secure web gateway just looks at the web traffic, right? The Entra Internet Access knows who is making that request, because of course it is also the identity provider in your organization, right? And also it knows what device they are on, what is the device's risk level, and therefore apply the conditional access policy accordingly on that specific context. So if you look at the key capabilities of Entra Internet Access, and as I said, we will double click on these capabilities as we go forward. But the key capabilities here includes the universal tenant restrictions, which can help you prevent data exfiltration to unauthorized M365 or Entra ID tenants. It also gives you token prevention, which can prevent token theft attack. We also have the web content filtering, cloud firewall, which can protect against threats. It also delivers best in class M365 optimization. All this is part of Microsoft's secure edge solution, right? So we've got the security service edge story as part of the Entra Internet Access. You can position this along Microsoft Entra Private Access as the SASE conversation for your customers, where you can have a conversation around replacing the legacy secure web gateways if the customer already has. Private access, or the Entra Private Access, is Microsoft Zero Trust Network Access solution. That's the modern replacement for a legacy VPN. And I'm sure the VPN replacement story is a huge opportunities for you as a partners, right? So the problems with traditional VPN is that your customers typically, I'm sure, would be aware of it. It grants access to the entire network and not just a specific application. Although it could be a subnet, but still it is on the network layer and not on the app layer, which could be slow, which could be frustrating for the users. It's complex to manage. And once the attacker gets in, the lateral movement is very much possible there, right? The Entra private access flips this model. So now we have the per app access instead of network access. The identity, which is verified before the connection is established, automatically can then do an app discovery to find out what should be protected. And there is an intelligent local access for optimal performance for that user to connect to that application, right? Now, I would say VPN license renewals typically are the perfect entry points for you. So when let's say a customer VPN contract is expiring, that's your moment as a partner. So you can position private access as the upgrade, which can improve both security as well as the user experience. Let's quickly talk about the licensing as well, because understanding this is also essential for your conversations with customers. Microsoft Entra ID P1 is roughly at 6 USD per user per month, which covers the core capabilities most customers will require. That includes the MFA, conditional access, SSO, self-service password reset, hybrid identity. So if your customer is on M365 E3 or maybe business premium, they already have the P1 included. Microsoft Entra ID P2 at 9 USD per user per month adds the identity protection, risk-based policies, and privileged identity management. So for customers who are handling the sensitive data or maybe they are in regulated industries, P2 is very essential. It's already part of E5. Now, typically, I have seen many customers, they don't realize they already have Android EP1 via their M365 subscription, but they also may not be using all the features. I guess that's a quick win, which where we as a partner, we can help them activate capabilities which they're already paying for, right? Now, for the full set of capabilities, of course, we have got the Microsoft Entra SKU, which bundles the internet access, private access, external identity, ID governance, and much more. So since this is a very evolving scenario, I would rather suggest you to navigate to that link, which is there at the bottom on the left hand side, and you could have a look at the current pricing and of course the current inclusions as part of the SKUs as well. Now let's talk about the key challenges and the opportunities. So here we have this slide which summarizes the four strategic opportunities that Microsoft is addressing and which you as a partner can go ahead and lead that conversations around it, right? So first of all, the identity based attacks are up to they they are risen up 300% this year, right? So that's where we can adopt the identity based protection. This is like your entry point into every security conversation. Information is the most attractive target. So we can protect information wherever it goes. So identity, in fact, governs the access to data. Attackers, they are constantly evolving, right? So we can detect attacks faster and automate the response. This is your AI and the Copilot story, right? More than most enterprises, they report using more than 60 plus security solutions per enterprise. This is where we use integrated tools. This is where you've got the Entra, which is part of the unified Microsoft security platform. Now, these four themes, they map directly to the conversation which you might already be having with your customers. You can use this slide as your conversation framework. You can ask which challenge is the number one pain point, maybe, and you can have this like your landing zone for your conversation with your customers.